Hey everyone, welcome back to the AniMonolith recap series. For that time, I got reincarnated as a slime. In this episode, we pick up right after the previous battle. Kalgurio opens his eyes and finds himself wrapped in a gentle, warm light. Disoriented, he looks around and realizes he's lying in a large, unfamiliar room. In front of him stands a young girl, around 12 or 13 years old, with silver blue hair and a soft, angelic smile. Her hand is glowing with a rainbow-colored light as she hovers it above Krishna, who, to Kalgurio's shock, slowly opens his eyes. Wait, Krishna was dead, wasn't he? Kalgurio panics, trying to shout in confusion, but no sound comes out. Then Krishna, clearly just as bewildered, meets his gaze. The girl continues her work, oblivious to their awakening. One after another, familiar faces come back to life. Bernie, Jiwoo, and other high-ranking officers. In total, 10 key Imperial commanders are revived in just moments. With a satisfied nod, the girl finally turns to Kalgurio and cheerfully asks, "Yo, you're awake? Remember your name? How are you feeling?" Nobody responds. They're still too stunned, checking their bodies, trying to grasp what just happened. Kalgurio is the first to speak. "I'm sorry, but weren't we dead?" At that moment, everyone's memories snap back. Diablo, the massacre, their defeat, it all comes flooding in. Hesitantly, Kalgurio dares to ask about Diablo. Maybe Rimuru killed him and revived them afterward? But before he can finish that thought, Diablo appears. "How dare you act so rude to Rimuru-sama?" Tension slams into the room. Everyone freezes. They all begin to grasp the horrifying truth. The one who revived them wasn't some benevolent cleric. It was Demon Lord Rimuru, the very target of their failed invasion. Rimuru calmly breaks the silence. "Relax. This isn't charity work. I brought you back for a reason because now you're mine. Pawns on my board." Without waiting for a reply, Rimuru leaves, leaving the resurrected soldiers stunned and terrified. Why did Rimuru revive his enemies? It turns out the idea came from Raphael. Strategically, it was a move to shut down any future criticism about Tempest's ruthlessness. But more than that, Rimuru wanted to hold these officers accountable, to make them live with the consequences of their actions. As for the method of resurrection, to understand how this works, we need to talk about souls. Every soul has two parts. The core, this contains the self, your ego, memories, and all the embedded information like skills. The energy layer, surrounding the core, this is what powers all abilities. It's your magical fuel. Monsters usually have less soul energy. Humans tend to have more. And the stronger the individual, the greater the amount. Some souls can equal thousands of ordinary ones in raw energy alone. After Shion's death, Raphael spent time analyzing this system. That research eventually allowed Rimuru to manipulate souls directly. When reviving Kalgurio and his officers, Rimuru took the core of each soul and transferred it into an emulated soul, a kind of artificial vessel. Their original energy was stripped out and repurposed elsewhere. You guessed it. Rimuru used that harvested soul energy to help evolve his subordinates into demon lords. That's why Kalgurio's group felt so weak. They still had their skills stored in the core, but they no longer had the energy to activate them. However, over time, Rimuru believed they could adapt. With enough practice, they could channel elemental magic from the atmosphere to substitute for lost soul energy, or just swing swords like regular soldiers. Still, they'd never be as powerful as before. This resurrection method isn't perfect. It only works on those whose bodies were intact or could be reconstructed. Artificial bodies were an option, but Rimuru doesn't just leave corpses lying around, so time was limited. Out of 940,000 soldiers, only about 700,000 were revived. The remaining 240,000 were lost, vaporized by magic like nuclear flame, death streak, or gravity collapse, by the primordial trios, or their egos had simply shattered from fear. So, after testing the resurrection on Kalgurio, Rimuru moved down to floor 70 of the labyrinth to revive the rest. Simple in theory, but in practice, he left everything to Raphael. Rimuru just stood there awkwardly while his divine AI handled it all. Meanwhile, the revived officers, unaware of who really did the work, dropped to their knees and worshipped Rimuru like a god. And that's how 700,000 Imperial soldiers got a second chance at life. Reborn not as heroes of the Empire, but as pawns of Demon Lord Rimuru. All thanks to a soul transfer technique nobody really understands except Raphael. After completing the resurrection ritual, Rimuru set up a few temporary tents on the 70th floor of the labyrinth to distribute food to the 700,000 revived Imperial soldiers. From this point on, their lives would be artificial, stripped of combat power, under strict surveillance, and completely incapable of ever going against Tempest again, thanks to the curse embedded in their pseudo-souls. That said, Rimuru wasn't totally heartless. They were still allowed basic civil rights, like falling in love, getting married, and having children, with proper family planning, of course. In other words, they were no longer soldiers, just supervised civilians. Judging by their behavior, Rimuru could tell no one would dare to rebel against Demon Lord Rimuru when they were all so grateful and in awe. They were defeated from the bottom of their hearts. And just like that, the Armored Corps wasn't just physically crushed, they were broken mentally and emotionally. The war had come to a definitive end, an absolute defeat for the Empire on every level. The next day, Tempest held a grand victory ceremony in the arena, packed with disciplined soldiers, commanders, and notable foreign guests. In his slime form, Rimuru took the stage to deliver a speech originally written by Shuna. Even though the Empire's Western invasion hadn't fully ended, Rimuru used the occasion to uplift morale. Among the guests were the Holy Knight Order and vampire reinforcements, those who had died in the labyrinth and were resurrected, alongside representatives like Alvis, Phobio, and Jane, the head of Dworgon's Mage Council, invited mostly to voice diplomatic concerns. Currently, 60,000 of Yuki's troops were still engaged with Dworgon forces to the east. Jane requested Tempest's aid, but Rimuru couldn't directly intervene due to a non-aggression pact with Yuki. Instead, he dispatched Laplace to negotiate with Yuki on his behalf. As for rewards, Rimuru planned to give his subordinates titles, then give them some sort of reward if there was one, and finally let them evolve. According to Raphael's calculations, candidates needed both a spiritual bond with Rimuru and a Demon Lord seed. 12 initially qualified: Benimaru, Gio, Gabiru, Ranga, Shion, Adaman, Zegion, Diablo, Kumara, plus Shoi, Gobta, and Abito. However, only 9 would be promoted now. The original trio, Shoi, Gobta, Abito, didn't meet the bond requirement. The first 3, Benimaru, Gio, and Gabiru, were deferred to maintain the kingdom's defenses, leaving 9 to be awakened this ceremony: Ranga, Benimaru, Shion, Gabil, Geld, Diablo, Testarossa, Ultima, Carrera, Kumara, Zegion, and Adelman. Before preparing for today's ceremony, Rimuru had to think quite a bit. Rimuru had 3 major concerns. Firstly, with Albus and Jane present, any show of power risked exposure, but he figured the truth would come out anyway, no point in pretending. Second, Rimuru was worried that his subordinates would sleep for 2 to 3 days. Drawing from his own 3-day harvest festival, he anticipated a similar incapacitation period for the promoted, not ideal during wartime. Yet with the Empire weakened and no immediate threats, he judged the timing appropriate. The first to be called, Benimaru Shuna, honored Benimaru first. As praise was read, Rimuru whispered to him, "Alright, well, Benimaru-kun, I'm going to reward you right now." Benimaru, sensing this wasn't ordinary, replied, "Could you stop calling me kun? And are you up to something again?" His hesitancy stemmed from the timing. Evolving mid-war could leave them defenseless. Rimuru calmly explained that the awakening was essential to turn the tide against the Empire and assured him the process would be swift. Benimaru, though surprised, accepted, promising not to lose control. Right after the ceremony began, Benimaru was officially granted the title Flare Lord and gifted 100,000 souls by Rimuru to trigger his evolution into a true Demon Lord. But something unexpected happened. Nothing. Benimaru didn't show any signs of evolving. It turned out that another condition was required. According to the voice of the world, Benimaru could evolve from an Oni into a divine Oni, essentially a spiritual life form. However, such beings lose the ability to reproduce. That meant, if Benimaru chose to evolve now, he'd never be able to have children again. Rather than rush the process, Benimaru decided to delay his evolution to fulfill his old duty as clan leader, to find a wife and have children first. It was ironic. The man who had always avoided romance now had to marry for the good of his race. Rimuru, worried that Benimaru would procrastinate forever, took matters into his own hands. "Then I'll treat this as part of your reward. Do you give me permission to choose your bride?" Benimaru was stunned. The Colosseum erupted in cheers. Everyone, including Shuna and Hakurao, joined in, pushing Benimaru to make a decision. Hakuryu, holding his sword, ominously asked, "Young master, Who will you choose? Suddenly, Momiji and Albus stepped forward from the guest seats. Rimuru-sama, as part of my reward, I humbly request permission to marry Lord Benimaru. Momiji. Your Majesty, please allow me to become Lord Benimaru's second wife. Albus. Right then, Benimaru turned to Rimuru with eyes full of desperation. Rimuru was torn. He didn't want to cause Benimaru grief, but also didn't want to disappoint Albus. However, Tempest law prohibits polygamy, except in cases where a widow wishes to remarry. Just as Rimuru was preparing to gently reject Albus, Raphael cut in with a timely reminder. According to Tempest law, polygamy is only allowed if the second wife is a widow. That seemed like a way out, until Albus casually revealed, "You don't need to worry, I recently got married, and my husband has sadly passed away." Everyone was stunned. Rimuru and Benimaru froze in disbelief. Wait, what? Albus explained that she and Momiji had struck up an unexpected friendship after a long rivalry. They agreed to both become Benimaru's wives. To qualify under Tempest law, Albus had married Phobio and then fought him in the labyrinth until one of them died. Albus won. Phobio, of course, was revived later, but technically he had died, making Albus a legal widow. Even Rimuru was speechless. It was a legal loophole, masterfully exploited. If I won, she said she'd marry me, so... Can I cry now? Phobio, pitifully. Rimuru turned to Rigurd for judgment. Is this actually allowed? Of course, Rigurd declared. They used wisdom and power to claim what they wanted. It's perfectly acceptable. Even Shuna joined in. Brother, they've gone this far. Please give them your answer. No one objected, not even Shion. Surprisingly, everyone supported Benimaru marrying both women. In the eyes of monsters, strength and resolve determine legitimacy. And this was clearly a show of both. Now, all eyes were on Benimaru, who had to decide whether or not to follow through. I don't want to complicate things, Sue said bluntly. You seem to doubt your love. If a man and a woman don't love each other, they can't have a child. If you don't have feelings for them, then just say no from the beginning. But if you have even a little bit of feelings for them, why don't you just hold them and show them the result? Rimuru found Sue's words blunt to the point of being almost offensive, but also frustratingly persuasive. If you cared, you act on it. If not, you let them go. Simple. And yet nothing felt simple about this for Benimaru. Rimuru knew why his general had been hesitating. It wasn't just about picking a bride. Benimaru was stuck in a moral tangle. To him, loving two women felt disloyal. Sleeping beside one while the other watched from afar was unbearable. And even worse, after evolving into a divine Oni, a spiritual being, he would live for thousands of years while his wives aged and died. The thought of losing them to time was unbearable. But now, in front of everyone, Benimaru finally stood tall and asked, Momiji, Albus, as Lord Rimuru's guardian, I may not always be by your side. Knowing that, will you still choose me? Their response? Instant and absolute. Even death wouldn't stop them. And just like that, it exploded in cheers. Benimaru blushed bright red as he embraced both Momiji and Albus in front of thousands of roaring onlookers. Rimuru watched, equal parts amused and jealous. Two beautiful women. At once. Not bad for the man who used to run from commitment. Meanwhile, Rimuru looked down at his own non-functional anatomy and could only sigh in resignation. And today's video ends here. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.